The signal flickered, then fractured into a cascade of corrupted data packets. Deep inside the subterranean pit, a fortified command facility buried 3 stories beneath the Negev desert. A single digital icon representing the cargo vessel Victoria jumped 17 nautical miles in less than 1/10 of a second. Analyst Tamar Cohen, her face a pale mask illuminated by the cold blue light of her console, did not blink. Her screen, a mosaic of geographic information systems, raw signals intelligence, and cascading lines of code, showed 3 other icons, designated friendly assets, closing on the Victoria's last known position in the southern Red Sea. The icon for Shayatet 13's lead RHIB, call sign Dolphin 1, was now flashing a pulsing, urgent red. A single line of text appeared in her encrypted peer-to-peer chat window, a direct zero-latency link to the mission commander, Amos. It contained one word: status? The algorithm Tamar had written, the one that had consumed the last 6 months of her life and codenamed Manticore, was designed to detect inconsistencies in a ship's automatic identification system. AIS is the circulatory system of global maritime traffic, a vessel's digital handshake broadcasting identity, position, course, and speed via VHF radio. It is a system built on a fragile foundation of trust. And the Victoria was a liar. Its broadcast signal was a ghost, a perfect digital echo of a legitimate tanker 300 miles away in the Gulf of Aden. Its signal captured by a sophisticated satellite receiver and rebroadcast with a falsified GPS timestamp. But the echo wasn't perfect. Manticore, running on a dedicated quantum computing server cluster, had detected a latency differential, a signal propagation delay of just 1.2 nanoseconds. The spoofed signal had to travel from the real tanker to a low-Earth orbit satellite, down to the KLOS-C's receiver, and then be rebroadcast. That extra hop, that infinitesimal delay, caused by the journey through the ionosphere and back, was the tell. A digital ghost has no shadow, but this one had a faint, almost imperceptible electronic scent. It was enough. But now, the scent was gone. The close sea, hiding behind the Victoria's phantom signal, had stopped broadcasting entirely. It had gone dark, 17 nautical miles from its last projected position, a calculated guess based on its last known vector. Amos had 3 commando teams, 24 men in 3 11-meter Morena rigid-hulled inflatable boats, in the water, in hostile territory, chasing a phantom. The mission clock on Tamar's display showed 01:47 a.m. The window for a covert, moonless pre-dawn intercept was closing in 73 minutes. After that, the rising sun would expose them to any coastal radar from Eritrea or Yemen, not to mention the dozens of fishing dhows that littered these waters. Tamar's fingers, stained with ink from a leaking pen, moved across her keyboard with a speed that belied her calm demeanor. She bypassed the primary satellite feed from the Eros-B imaging satellite, which was now useless. It was an optical satellite, blind in the darkness and the heavy cloud cover that had rolled in from the Ethiopian highlands. She typed a direct command string, accessing a command line interface that was several security levels above her pay grade. She was tasking the OFEC 9 reconnaissance satellite. This was a flagrant breach of protocol. A SIGINT analyst from Unit 8200 does not independently task a multi-billion shekel strategic asset controlled by AMN, the Military Intelligence Directorate. The request required 3 sequential digital handshakes from the AMN operations chief, the head of special operations, and the IDF General Staff. She had none of them. The system prompted her for a Tier 1 command code. A 30-second countdown timer appeared in the corner of the prompt. Failure to authenticate would trigger a system-wide security lockdown of her terminal and a Level 1 alert to the Directorate's Cyber Defense Unit, the MATSOF. She typed in a 64-character alphanumeric string she wasn't supposed to have, one she had acquired 6 months ago from a careless network administrator in the Directorate. He had been struggling to recover data from a physically damaged personal hard drive containing photos of his daughter's first birthday. Tamar had fixed it for him in under an hour, using a technique involving a Class 100 clean room and a platter transplant. In gratitude, he had mentioned a legacy backdoor code left in the satellite tasking system by its original programmers for diagnostic purposes. He thought it had been patched out years ago. It hadn't. It was her insurance policy for a moment just like this. The system accepted the code. The countdown vanished. A new window opened. A raw data stream from OFEC 9's synthetic aperture radar, SAR, began to flow. SAR doesn't take pictures. It paints the ocean's surface with X-band microwave pulses, measuring the return echo's timing and intensity to create a detailed topographical map regardless of light or weather. She had to find a single 150-meter-long steel vessel in 2,000 square miles of open water. And she had to do it before Amos's teams hit bingo fuel. The red light on her physical console began to flash. The security alert. Not from an automated system, but from a human. Someone from the Directorate's watch floor was demanding to know who had just hijacked their most valuable eye in the sky. She ignored it. Her eyes scanned the cascading lines of radar data, her brain processing the patterns. She wasn't looking for a ship. A ship is a bright, obvious radar reflection. The KLOS-C would be employing radar-absorbent materials and angling its surfaces to minimize its return signature. She was looking for a hole, a patch of water that was unnaturally calm. A ship of that size, even in moderate seas, leaves a Kelvin wake, a V-shaped pattern of transverse and diverging waves that is a fundamental signature of fluid dynamics. The wake, a subtle but detectable disturbance in the sea state, lingers for minutes, a ghostly scar on the water's surface. The spoofed AIS signal was a lie, but the ship's physical presence was a truth that could not be hidden from physics. The mission clock ticked to 0149. Amos's second message appeared, more insistent. Status Tamar. Now, we are burning fuel for nothing. She found it. A faint trace, a linear disturbance in the sea clutter. The wake angle was too narrow for a container ship at cruising speed. From that scar, from the rate of its decay and the angle of its V, she could extrapolate the vessel's new course and speed. She ran the calculation, her custom software modeling the hydrodynamics based on the SAR's interferometric data. The ship hadn't just gone dark. It had executed a hard turn to port, 90 degrees, and increased speed to 18 knots. It was heading directly towards the coast of Eritrea, not Sudan. It was their contingency plan. They knew they were being watched. They were making a run for the nearest friendly shore. She typed the new coordinates, a full intercept solution with course, speed, and projected position in 10 minutes, into the chat window and hit enter. She had just sent a team of Israeli commandos into the territorial waters of a hostile nation, based on a 1.2 nanosecond ghost and a faint ripple in the water. And now, Major Kobe Shaked, the security officer from the Directorate, was standing directly behind her, his face a mask of cold fury. Analyst Cohen, he began, his voice low and dangerous. Explain to me why you have just committed an act of operational treason. Phase 1. The Spark. This operation, codenamed Full Disclosure, did not begin with a flashing light on a screen. It began with a failure. 18 months prior, in March 2011, a 120-Grad rocket fired from the Gaza Strip slammed into a residential building in Ashkelon. It was a standard attack, but the post-blast analysis by Israeli bomb disposal experts from the Yahalom unit revealed something new. The rocket's warhead casing, examined under a scanning electron microscope, contained trace elements of tungsten and chromium in a 3:1 ratio. This specific alloy was used to increase fragmentation velocity and penetration, a signature of the manufacturing process at the Shahid Bagheri Industrial Group, an Iranian defense conglomerate sanctioned for its role in Iran's ballistic missile program. The serial numbers were not stamped, but laser-etched in a specific Farsi military font. This was not a standard, locally made Qassam rocket. It was a state-of-the-art, military-grade weapon smuggled from Iran. It was a new link in a very old chain. The intelligence failure was absolute. A weapon of that size and sophistication could not be smuggled in a suitcase. It had to come by sea. Mossad's mission was to find the route and sever it. The file landed on the desk of Dagan, the director of Mossad. Dagan was a man forged in the crucible of Sayeret Matkal, Israel's premier special forces unit. He viewed intelligence not as an academic exercise, but as a weapon to be aimed. He had famously revitalized the agency with a new doctrine: bringing the knife to the throat. This meant proactive, aggressive operations deep inside enemy territory. The Iranian rocket in Ashkelon was a direct challenge to his doctrine. He convened a meeting in his soundproof, mahogany-paneled office at Mossad headquarters, north of Tel Aviv. The attendees were a triad of specialists who would form the core of the operation. First, there was Yair, the head of the Caesarea department, Mossad's operational arm. A veteran of the First Lebanon War, Yair was a master of human intelligence, of recruiting and running agents in the most dangerous corners of the world. His greatest success was Operation Moses, the clandestine evacuation of Ethiopian Jews from Sudan in the 1980s. He had operated out of a fake tourist resort on the Red Sea coast, a Mossad front. He knew Sudan. He knew its ports, its corrupt officials, its tribal politics. He understood that in a place like Sudan, information was a currency more valuable than cash. His skill was turning a whisper in a crowded market into actionable intelligence. He was the old guard, a believer in shoe-leather espionage. Next was Amos, commander of Shayatet 13, Israel's naval commando unit. Amos was the new breed of Israeli officer. He held a degree in mechanical engineering from the Technion and had written his thesis on the hydrodynamics of high-speed assault craft. He was a warrior scholar. His defining moment came during the Second Lebanon War. Flashback: Tyre, Lebanon, August 2006. The sea was black, the air thick with the smell of salt and diesel. Amos, then a captain, knelt on the pitching deck of a Dvora-class patrol boat, 5 kilometers off the coast. His target was a 3-story apartment building in the northern suburbs of Tyre. Unremarkable except for the Chinese-made C-802 anti-ship missile launcher hidden in the garage of the ground-floor apartment. The missile posed a direct threat to the Israeli naval blockade. 2 of his men, strapped into Draeger LARV rebreathers that emitted no bubbles, slipped silently over the side, their black combat fins barely disturbing the water. They were the scouts. Amos watched their infrared strobes on his thermal imager until they vanished beneath the waves. The plan was one of audacious simplicity. The scouts would secure a beachhead, The main force, 16 men in 2 RHIBs, would follow, moving on foot through 2 kilometers of hostile urban terrain. They would neutralize the Hezbollah guards, rig the missile launcher with explosives, and exfiltrate before dawn. The insertion was flawless. But as they approached the target building, a dog started barking. A single light flickered on, then another. The ambush was sudden and violent. RPGs slammed into the street, and the night erupted in a storm of automatic weapons fire from 3 directions. 2 of his men were hit in the initial volley. They were pinned down, taking casualties. Standard procedure was to break contact, pop smoke, and fall back to the exfiltration point. But the missile was still a threat. Amos made a decision that would define his career. He split his force. He and a 4-man team would provide covering fire, a deliberate high-volume distraction. The other 10, led by his deputy, would flank the enemy positions, using the narrow alleyways for cover. It was a high-risk gamble. He was violating the cardinal rule of special operations. Never divide your force in the face of a superior enemy. For 20 minutes, Amos's team was the anvil. They absorbed the full force of the Hezbollah attack, returning fire with a disciplined fury. Their CTAR-21 rifles spat fire, the sound sharp and distinct against the deeper chatter of the enemy's Kalashnikovs. One of his men, a medic, was shot in the leg while dragging a wounded comrade to cover. Amos himself took a piece of shrapnel to his shoulder. Just as their ammunition was running critically low, the flanking team struck. The enemy, focused on the firefight to their front, were caught completely by surprise. The battle was over in 90 seconds of brutal, close-quarters combat. They took the building, rigged the C-802 with 20 kilograms of C4, and carried their wounded back to the beach. As the sun began to rise, they watched from the sea as a massive secondary explosion lit up the coastline. The missile's warhead and solid rocket fuel had cooked off. Mission accomplished. Amos dealt in physics, not personalities. He calculated risk, applied force, and achieved the objective. Present day. Finally, there was Tamar Cohen. At 26, she was the youngest person in the room and the only one not in uniform. A product of Unit 8200, the IDF's elite Signals Intelligence Corps, Tamar was a prodigy. She had been recruited directly out of high school into the ultra-selective Talpiot program. She saw the world not as a collection of people and places, but as a vast, interconnected network of signals. Her skill was finding the anomalies in that network. She had made her name by tracking a Hezbollah commander through the metadata of his son's online video game account, correlating his server login times with the known movements of his convoy. To Yair, the world was a network of human relationships. To Amos, it was a physical battle space. To Tamar, it was a river of data. Dagan laid out the problem. Iran's Quds force is using the chaos of the Arab Spring as a cover. They have established a new logistics corridor. We believe it runs from their port at Bandar Abbas down the Red Sea to a transfer point in either Sudan or Eritrea. From there, the weapons are moved overland, through Egypt's Sinai Peninsula by Bedouin smugglers and into Gaza via the Rafah tunnels. The rocket that hit Ashkelon was a proof of concept. The next shipment will be bigger. It will contain Fajr 5 rockets, possibly even anti-ship missiles, weapons that can alter the strategic balance. Our mission is to find that shipment, intercept it, and expose the entire network to the world. Yair, I need a source on the ground. Amos, I need a plan to take down a freighter in the middle of the Red Sea. Tamar, I need you to find the needle in the haystack. Phase 2. The foundation. The chessboard was more complex than ever. The fall of Mubarak in Egypt had created a power vacuum in the Sinai. Bedouin smugglers, once content with moving cigarettes and refugees, were now working with global jihadist groups and Iranian agents. The Sinai had become a lawless superhighway for weapons. Complicating matters, the Egyptian General Intelligence Directorate, GID, was running its own aggressive and often clumsy counter-smuggling operation in the Sinai, creating a serious risk of a blue-on-gray incident. Sudan, under the rule of Omar al-Bashir, was a pariah state, desperate for allies and cash. Bashir was playing a double game, cooperating with the CIA on counter-terrorism while allowing Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, to operate out of Port Sudan. Eritrea was a black hole, a totalitarian state so isolated that reliable intelligence was almost non-existent. The Red Sea itself was a crowded waterway. Hovering near the Bab el-Mandeb Strait was the academic Pashin, a Russian intelligence-gathering trawler disguised as a civilian research vessel. Its powerful electronic surveillance suite was a constant threat, forcing any Israeli operation into a strict MCON, emission control bubble. A single stray radio transmission could compromise the entire mission. The IRGC's Quds Force, led by the enigmatic Qasem Soleimani, was the architect of this new route. They were masters of asymmetric warfare, using proxies and clandestine logistics to project power without inviting direct retaliation. They operated through a web of front companies, forged shipping manifests, and corrupt officials. They were patient, disciplined, and lethal. The mission's genesis point came 3 months after the meeting. Yair activated a dormant asset in Port Sudan. The asset was codenamed Cardinal, a mid-level port administrator with a gambling problem and a daughter studying medicine in London. Mossad paid his debts and her tuition. In return, Cardinal reported on unusual cargo movements. For months, his reports were routine. Agricultural equipment from China, used cars from the UAE. Then, in November, he sent a message. It was delivered via a prearranged dead drop, a micro SD card hidden inside a hollowed-out bolt on a specific forklift in the container yard. The message was fragmented, typed on a simple text file. Heavy crates, listed as construction materials, unloaded at night at Pier 7, the section controlled by the military. Supervisors not Sudanese, spoke Farsi, ship name Victoria, Panamanian flag. The message was a spark, but it wasn't a fire. There were a dozen ships named Victoria with Panamanian flags. Tamar's team cross-referenced the known movements of all vessels named Victoria with the date of Cardinal's report. They looked for any ship that had docked in both an Iranian port and Port Sudan within a plausible time frame. They found 3 potential candidates, all owned by single-purpose shell corporations registered in Panama, with mailing addresses in Cyprus. Cyprus was the key. It was a hub for Russian oligarchs, Middle Eastern financiers, and intelligence agencies from around the world. Yair's team in Limassol, operating out of a small import-export business, was tasked with investigating the 3 Cypriot shipping agencies. The problem was that these agencies were little more than mailboxes. The real owners were hidden behind layers of corporate secrecy. The plan was a classic Caesarea operation. The target was the weakest link, a junior accountant named Andreas Papas, who worked for the agency managing the most likely Victoria candidate. Yair's psychological profile of Papas was thorough. 42 years old, divorced, in debt from a failed restaurant venture. He was lonely, financially desperate, and harbored a quiet resentment against his employers. He was the perfect target. A female Mossad agent, a Gaza codenamed Natalie, met Pappas at a high-end coffee shop. She presented herself as an art consultant. Over 2 weeks, she cultivated the relationship. The goal was not to recruit him, but to use him as an unwitting delivery system. The delivery system was a custom-made USB drive, a Kingston data traveler rebuilt by Mossad's technology division, Neviot. Its firmware had been replaced with a sophisticated piece of malware, codenamed Chimera, designed to infiltrate an air-gapped computer network. On a Friday evening, Natalie gave Pappas the USB drive. "I have some prospectuses for a new art fund on here," she told him. "Maybe you can look them over." She also included a folder of personal photos, a psychological lure. On Monday morning, Pappas plugged the drive into his work computer. Chimera activated, running directly from the drive's own processor. It performed a rapid, keyword-based search of the entire office network for strings like Bandar Abbas, Port Sudan, Manifest, and the Farsi word for cement, which intelligence suggested was the cover cargo. The scan took 11 seconds. Chimera located 3 relevant documents, copied them into a hidden partition on the USB drive itself, and then activated its second component, a miniature, low-power transmitter. It broadcast the encrypted data in a single 0.7-second burst on a frequency designed to blend in with ambient Wi-Fi noise. 400 meters away, a high-gain Yagi-Uda directional antenna disguised as a satellite dish on a rooftop received the packet. Natalie, sitting in a car down the street, received a single-word message on her encrypted phone. "Received." She sent a final text to Pappas. "Something has come up. I have to leave the country." "I'm sorry." Then she removed the battery from her phone and began her own exfiltration. The team had the data, but celebration was premature. The files were encrypted with Secure Crypt 3.0 using AES 256 encryption. Brute forcing it was a mathematical impossibility. This was the first major setback. Intelligence from Cardinal suggested the shipment was imminent, scheduled to depart from Bandar Abbas within 72 hours. Tamar's team began a frantic analysis of the Secure Crypt software. They found a flaw not in the encryption, but in its password recovery feature. It involved a challenge response protocol with the company's server in Zurich. Tamar's team created a virtual machine that mimicked the accountant's computer. They used a man-in-the-middle attack, routing traffic through a compromised node at the DECIX Internet Exchange in Frankfurt, to intercept and record the handshake. They then spoofed the Secure Crypt server's IP address and replayed the handshake back to the software. The software, believing it was communicating with a legitimate server, opened a backdoor that allowed for a password reset. They were in. As the first document materialized on the screen, a new crisis erupted. A red alert flashed from Yair's station chief in Cyprus. Andreas Pappas had been detained by Cypriot internal security. Perhaps the Iranians had their own source inside the agency. Perhaps Pappas had made a mistake. The reason didn't matter. The network was blown. Natalie's exfiltration was accelerated to a clandestine sea-based extraction. The listening post team had to scrub their location, destroying their equipment with thermite charges. Yair's entire intelligence network in Limassol, built over 5 years, was dismantled in hours. They were now blind in Cyprus. This was the second setback, and it was devastating. The newly decrypted files were a snapshot of a plan that might already be obsolete. The pressure on Tamar's team intensified. The decrypted manifest was a bombshell. The ship was not the Victoria. It was a vessel named the Klaus C. The manifest listed its cargo as 200 containers of Portland cement. But an insurance addendum detailed special handling for 40 containers, identified by serial number. These containers were listed as weighing 2.5 tons more than the others. The email thread contained the final piece, a projected departure date and time from Bandar Abbas. They had 36 hours, but the route details were ambiguous. The official destination was Port Sudan, but an internal note mentioned a possible diversion to Massawa, Eritrea, pending final instructions. The Iranians had built redundancy into their plan. Amos needed to position his Shayatet 13 forces, but the Red Sea was vast. A team positioned for Sudan would be hundreds of miles from Eritrea. They would have to gamble. Phase 3. The core. Based on prevailing currents and typical shipping lanes, Dagan made the call. Position the intercept teams for the Sudan route. It was a 60-40 bet. Amos deployed his men. 24 commandos and 3 Morena RHIBs were loaded into the belly of an IDF C-130 Hercules. They flew a low-level, circuitous route over the Arabian Peninsula, landing at a dusty, disused airfield in a friendly East African nation, a clandestine arrangement secured by Mossad. From there, the RHIBs were launched from a larger, unmarked mothership and began their long transit into the Red Sea. The first new problem arose 24 hours into the KLOC's voyage. The plan had called for a visual confirmation of the ship before the final intercept. A Seahorse unmanned surface vehicle, a low-profile, semi-submersible drone launched from the mothership, was dispatched to shadow the target from a distance of 10 kilometers. It was equipped with a high-magnification thermal camera. For 6 hours, the mission went perfectly. The Seahorse provided a steady stream of video, confirming the ship's identity and course. But then, the video feed sputtered and died. The USV's status indicator on Amos's command tablet turned from green to black. It had vanished. Back in the pit, Tamar's team analyzed the final data packets from the drone. There was no sign of a malfunction. The last telemetry reading showed the engine, power, and communication systems were all nominal. The only anomaly was a sudden, massive burst of microwave energy detected by the drone's passive ESM receiver, originating from the Close Sea. The Iranians weren't just running dark. They were actively hunting for surveillance. They had used a burst transmission, high-power magnetron, essentially a weaponized microwave oven, to fry the drone's unshielded guidance computer. This was a sophisticated countermeasure, one they shouldn't have possessed. The mission was now effectively blind. As Amos's RHIBs closed to the last known intercept point, a second crisis hit. Dolphin 2, the center boat in their formation, dropped off the tactical network. Dolphin 1, this is Pitt. Tamar's voice came over Amos's headset, clipped and professional. We've lost Dolphin 2's SATCOM handshake. Status? Stand by, Amos replied, his voice calm despite the adrenaline spike. He switched to the short-range VHF. Dolphin 2, this is 1, radio check. Silence. Dolphin 2, signal with IR strobe if you copy. A few seconds later, a rhythmic pulse of infrared light appeared on his night vision goggles. They were there, but they were deaf and dumb to the command center. Pitt, we have visual on 2, Amos reported. Their long-range comms are down. We can't proceed with a compromised command link. Inside the pit, a frantic diagnostic began. It's the primary power converter for the ANPRC-117G. A communications engineer reported to Dagan, pointing at a schematic on a secondary screen. It's fried, probably a power surge. They have a spare, but swapping it on a pitching boat in total darkness is a non-trivial task. Talk them through it, Dagan ordered. Now. For the next 15 minutes, an impossible remote repair unfolded. An engineer in the Negev desert, using a duplicate radio set in a lab, dictated instructions over Amos's command channel, who then relayed them via VHF to Dolphin 2. Tell them to open the main housing, 4 hex bolts. They need a 3mm driver. Carefully disconnect the primary bus cable. It's the red one. Do not touch the capacitor leads next to it. They'll still hold a charge that can stop a man's heart. Now, locate the spare converter. It's in the Pelican case, marked C7. They have to seat it perfectly. If the pins are misaligned by a single degree, it will short the entire system. On the water, 2 commandos, their faces illuminated by the red glow of a headlamp. Huddled over the radio console, their hands moving with surgical precision despite the bucking of the RHIB. Finally, a voice crackled over Amos's headset. Dolphin 1, this is 2. We are back online. The icon on Tamar's screen blinked from red back to green. They had lost 16 precious minutes. Then came the third complication, the one that threatened to unravel everything. A priority alert flashed on Dagan's personal terminal. It was a flash-level diplomatic cable from the Israeli embassy in Washington. The U.S. State Department had delivered a formal démarche. U.S. naval intelligence, likely tipped off by the Russian SIGINT trawler Academic Pashin, had detected anomalous special operations activity in the southern Red Sea. A U.S. Navy P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft was being diverted from its station in Djibouti to investigate and render assistance if necessary. The P-8's ETA was 90 minutes. They're painting us into a corner, Yair said, his voice grim. If that